Hello. So today I just wanted to address something that seems to have come up several times lately, and that is conversations that I've had with other people who either have an inability to see or a refusal to acknowledge the presence of evil among us. And it's just kind of been on my mind and my heart lately. Today is my daughter's 19th birthday, and she was blowing out candles and, smiling, taking ribbons off of packages. And by the end of the day, my mind had wandered to another 19-year-old girl that I want to discuss today. So, this is in honor of Suzanne Marie Collins. She was a Marine, Lance Corporal, and she was murdered when she was 19 years old. She was 19 years, 1 month, and I believe 14 days old when she was murdered. What I'm going to read to you today is just an excerpt from a book that was written by John Douglas. John Douglas, for those of you that don't know, is essentially the foremost authority, or was the foremost authority, really the man who started profiling within the FBI, and he interviewed many killers, many violent offenders. His work is outstanding. Kemper, Gain, Bundy, it just goes on. At any rate, this excerpt that I'm going to read to you is John putting into his own words what happened that day that Suzanne was killed. June 12th of 1985. And it's going to be a little bit hard to hear. It is hard for me to read these words. And part of the reason is that this narrative is going to be told from the perspective of the individual that took her life. It is very deep. It is very emotional. And it is very important as human beings for us to understand the other side to the coin that we refuse often to look at. So this is for Suzanne, and here we go. In the mind of a killer. This isn't the Hollywood version. It isn't sanitized or prettied up or rendered into art. This is the way it really happens, and if anything, it's worse than the way I'm going to describe it. As I had so many times before, I put myself in the mind of the killer. I don't know who she's going to be, but I'm ready to kill someone right now. My wife's left me alone for the whole evening, gone out to a Tupperware party with her friends rather than spending the time with me. It probably doesn't matter all that much. We've been fighting all of the time anyway, and we've been fighting all day. Still, it's depressing, and I'm sick and tired of being treated that way. Maybe she's really out seeking other men like my first wife had done. She got hers, though, ended up face down in the bathtub gagging on her own puke. Served her right for the way she treated me. Our 2 kids ended up with my folks. That's another thing that pisses me off, like I wasn't good enough to take care of them anymore. I sit around watching TV for a while by myself, drinking beer, a couple of 6-packs, and then a 5th of wine. But I still feel bad. I keep sinking lower. I need more beer and something else to drink. What's it now? 9:30 maybe? I get up and I drive to the mini-mart near the commissary and get another 6-pack of Moosehead. Then I drive out to Armour Road and just sit there drinking the beer, trying to sort things out in my own mind. The longer I'm sitting here, the more depressed I'm getting. I'm here alone, living on the base as a dependent to my own wife. They're all her friends, no friends of my own. I don't even have my kids. I was in the Navy myself, and thought it was going to work out, but it didn't. Now it's just one dead-end job after another. I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I should just go on home and wait, then have it out with her when she comes back, get some things settled. It's all running through my head at the same time. I'd really like to have someone to talk to right now, but there isn't anyone around. Hell, I don't know who I'd tell my problems to anyway. It's dark around, and it's starting to feel kind of inviting. I feel one with the night. The dark makes me anonymous. The dark makes me omnipotent. It's dark all around, and over on the north side of the base, parked on the side of the road, I'm drinking the beer just past the buffalo pens when I see her. She's just crossed from one side of the road to the other. She's jogging on the side of the road all by herself, even though it's already dark out. She's tall and really good looking, about 20, I'd say, with long brownish blonde hair hanging in a braid. Her forehead glistens with sweat in the moonlight. Yep, very pretty. She has on a red t-shirt with a marine emblem in gold on the front and little red shorts that show off her ass real nice and make her legs look like they go on forever. Not an ounce of fat on her. Those marine women keep themselves in real great shape. All that exercise and drilling. Not like the ones in the Navy. They could whip an ordinary man's ass if given half the chance. I watch her for a few moments, her boobs bouncing up and down with the rhythm of her run. I'm thinking about getting out to run with her, maybe strike up a conversation. But I know I'm not near in the shape that she's in. Besides, I'm dead fucking drunk. So maybe I pull up in the car and offer her a ride back to her barracks or something. Get her to talk to me that way. But then I'm thinking to myself, what's she going to do with someone like me? Then she probably could be with the hotshot Marines. A girl like that thinks she's too good to give my type the time of day. No matter what I say, she's going to blow me off. And I've been blown off enough already for one day. I've been blown off enough for one lifetime. Well, I'm not putting up with any of that bullshit anymore. Not tonight, anyway. Whatever I want, I'm just going to take. That's the only way you get anything in this world. Bitch is going to have to deal with me, whether she likes it or not. I start up the car and pull alongside her. I lean across the passenger window and call out, "Excuse me, do you know how far it is to the back to the other side of the base?" She doesn't seem scared or nothing. I guess because of the base sticker on the car, plus the fact that she probably thinks she can take care of herself, being a Marine and all. She stops, comes over to the car, real trusting-like, breathing a little heavy. She leans in the passenger side and points back and says it's about 3 miles. Then she smiles really pretty and turns back to jog some more. I know this is my only chance with her. Another second and she'll be gone. So I open the door, jump out, and I run up behind her. I whack her really hard from behind and she goes sprawling. Then I grab her. She kind of gasps as she realizes what's happening and she tries to get away from me. But even though she's tall and strong for a girl, I'm nearly a foot taller than her and have more than 100 pounds on her. So I hold on to her and whack her on the side of the head as hard as I can, which must make her see stars. Even still, she's putting up one hell of a fight. Tries to beat the shit out of me to get away. She's going to pay for that. No bitch is going to treat me that way. "Don't touch me, get away," she's screaming. I have to practically smother her to get her over to the car. I hit her again, which makes her wobbly on her feet, and then I grab her and put her in the car on the passenger side. Just then, I see 2 men who've been jogging run up toward the car, and they're shouting, so I gun the engine and get the hell out of Dodge. I know I have to get off the base. That's the first thing. So I head down the road towards the gate near the base theater. That's the only spot that's open at this time of night. I know because it's the one that I came in. I prop her up in the seat next to me to look like she's my date. Her head is resting on my shoulder, really romantic-like. In the darkness, it must be working because the guard doesn't even react. He just passes us through. We're out on Navy Road when she starts coming to and begins screaming again. She threatens to call the cops if I don't let her go, but no one's going to talk to me that way. It's not about what she wants anymore. It's about what I want. I'm in control, not her. So I take a hand off the steering wheel and backhand her hard across the face. This quiets her down. I know I can't bring her home. My old lady could be back by now. What am I going to do? Explain that this is really what I should be doing to her? I need somewhere me and this new bitch can be alone, that I won't be disturbed. I need to go somewhere I feel comfortable, somewhere I know that I can do what I have to, where no one will interrupt us. I have an idea. I drive down to the end of the road and turn right into the park. Edmund Orgel Park, it's called. I think she might be starting to wake up again, so I whack her really good across the side of the head. I drive past the basketball courts, past the restrooms and stuff, toward the other end of the park near the lake. I stop the car near the bank and turn off the motor. Now we are all alone. I grab her by the shirt and yank her out of the car. She's sort of half conscious and moaning. There's a cut around her eye and blood is coming from her nose and mouth. I get away from the car and I sling her onto the ground, but she starts to get up. This bitch is still trying to resist me. So I jump on top of her, kind of straddling like, and hit her around just a little bit more. There's this tall tree with spreading branches nearby. It's kind of cozy and romantic. She's mine now. I'm in control. I can do anything to her that I want. I tear off her clothes, Nike running shoes, then her fancy marine t-shirt and her little shorts, and that blue sweat belt around her waist. There's not much fight left in her. She isn't so tough anymore. I rip everything off of her, even her socks. She's trying to escape or get away, but she can't do much. I am in control. I can decide whether this bitch lives or she dies, and how she dies. It's all up to me. For the first time tonight, I feel like somebody. While I press my forearm down onto her neck to keep her quiet, I start going for her breast, the left one. But that's just for starters. I'm going to give it to this bitch like she's never had it before. I look around. I stand up for a moment, reach up above me and grab a limb from the tree. Snap it off, about 2.5, maybe 3 feet of it. It's hard because the sucker's almost 2 inches thick. The end of it is sharp where it's broken off, like an arrowhead or a spear. She seems like she's out cold just before, but she screams loud again. Her eyes are wild with pain. God, all that blood. I bet she's a virgin. This bitch is just screaming in agony. Here's for all the women who ever shit on me, I'm saying to myself. Here's for all the people who ever gave me a raw deal. Here's to life. Let someone else be shafted for a change. By now, she stopped struggling. After the frenzy is over and the wildness is gone, I start feeling calmer. I lean back and I look down at her. She's completely quiet and still. Her body is pale and empty looking, like something's gone. And I know she's finally dead, and for the first time in a hell of a long time, I feel completely alive. This is what happens. This is what it means to walk in the shoes, to know both the victim and the subject. How each interacts with the other. This is what you get from spending hours in prisons and penitentiaries, sitting across the table listening to actual stories. After you've heard from them, you begin to put the pieces together. The crime itself begins to talk to you, and as horrible as it sounds, this is what you have to do to be effective. I described this technique to a reporter interviewing me not long ago, and she said, "I can't even think about this kind of thing." And I replied, "Well, we better all think about it if we want to have fewer of them to think about." If you understand, not in some academic, intellectual way, but in a visceral, experimental way, then maybe we can begin to make a difference. What I've just described was my idea of what had happened late on the night of July 11th of 1985 and in the early morning of July 12th, the day that U.S. Marine Lance Corporal Suzanne Marie Collins, an accomplished, well-loved, exuberant, and beautiful young woman of 19, had died in a public park near the Memphis Naval Air Station just northeast of Millington, Tennessee. The 5'7", 118-pound Lance Corporal Collins had just left her barracks for a run shortly after 10 p.m. and never came back. Her nude and beaten body had been discovered in the park after she missed morning muster. The causes of death were reported as prolonged manual strangulation, blunt force trauma to the head, and massive internal hemorrhage from a sharply beveled tree limb being thrust so far into her body that it tore through her abdominal organs, liver, diaphragm, and into her lung. She had been scheduled to graduate on the 12th from the 4-month avionics school in pursuit of her goal of becoming one of the first female Marine aviators. It was always a searing and gut-wrenching experience to go through this exercise, but that's what I had to do if I was going to be able to see the crime through the offender's eyes. I'd already put myself through it from the victim's point of view, and that was almost unbearable. But it is also my job, a job I created for myself as a full-time criminal profiler at the Behavioral Sciences Division at the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Normally, when my group, the Investigative Support Unit, is called in, it was to provide a behavioral profile and investigative strategy to help police to hunt down an unknown subject. By this time, I'd already worked on more than 1,100 such cases since I had come to Quantico. But this time, the authorities had already had a suspect in custody when they called, and his name was Sedley Alley. A bearded 29-year-old white male from Ashland, Kentucky, 6 feet 4 inches tall, 220 pounds, a laborer for an air conditioning company, who lived on base as a dependent to his wife, Lynn, who was enlisted in the Navy. They already had a confession from him. In fact, they'd gotten it the next morning, but his defense was somewhat different than mine. Agents at the Naval Investigative Service had picked him up from the car description and 2 male joggers and the base gate guard. Allie told them that he'd been depressed after his wife Lynn had gone out to her Tupperware party, that he'd finished off 3 six-packs of beer and a bottle of wine in the house, and then had gone out in his old and dying green Mercury station wagon to the mini-mart near the post commissary to buy some more beer. He said he was becoming increasingly intoxicated as he drove aimlessly until he saw an attractive female in a marine t-shirt, running shorts, cross the street jogging. He said he got out of his car and started jogging with her, exchanging small talk, until after a few minutes he'd become winded from his drinking and smoking. He said he wanted to tell her his problems, but didn't feel she would care about them since she didn't know him, so he said goodbye and drove off. In his drunken state, he reported, he was drifting and weaving back and forth across the road. He knew he shouldn't be driving. He then heard a thump and felt a jolt in his car and realized he'd struck her. He put her in his car, telling her he was going to take her to the hospital, but he said she kept resisting him, threatening to have him arrested for a DUI. He drove off the base and headed for Edmund Orville Park, where he stopped the car and hoped to calm her down and talk her out of turning him in. But in the park, she continued berating him, he claimed, telling him how much trouble he was in. He yelled at her to shut up, and when she tried to open the door, he grabbed her by the shirt, opened his door, got out, and pulled her out with him. She was still yelling at him about how she was going to have him arrested and then tried to break away, so he jumped on top of her and straddled her to the ground just to keep her from running off. Allie wanted to just talk to her. She kept trying to get away. He described it as wiggling. At that point, he, quote, lost it for a second and hit her across the face, first once and then once or twice more with an open hand. He was scared and knew he was in trouble if he was turned in. He says he got off of her, trying to figure out what to do, and then went back to the Mercury for the yellow-handed screwdriver he needed to hotwire the car, and when he came back, he heard someone running in the dark. Panicked, he wheeled around and flung up his arm, which happened to be holding the screwdriver. It turned out to be the girl he struck, and the screwdriver must have hit her and penetrated the side of her head because she collapsed onto the ground. At this point, he didn't know what to do. Should he just run away, maybe go back to Kentucky? He didn't know. He decided he'd have to make the death look like something else, like she was attacked and raped. But of course, he hadn't had sex with her. Her injury and death had all been a horrible accident, so how was he going to make it look like a sexual attack? He removed her clothes from her body, that was the start, and then dragged her by the ankles away from the car and over to the lake bank and placed her under the tree. He was grasping at straws, he says, desperate to think of something, when he stretched his hand out and came in contact, by chance, with a tree limb, which he broke off. He then rolled her onto her stomach and pushed the stick into her just once, he claimed, just enough to make it look like she'd been attacked by a sex maniac. He ran back to his car, hurriedly left the scene, and left the park at the opposite end from which way he had driven in. Henry Hank Williams, assistant district attorney for Shelby County, Tennessee, was trying to sort the whole thing out. Williams was one of the best in the business, an imposing-looking former FBI agent in his early 40s with strong, chiseled features, kindly, sensitive eyes, and prematurely white hair. He'd never seen such a gruesome case. As soon as I looked at the file, I thought this was definitely a death penalty case, Williams commented. I wasn't going to plea bargain this one. The problem, as he saw it, though, would be to come up with a motive for such a savage murder that a jury could understand. After all, who in his right mind could do such a horrible thing? That was the angle the defense was playing. Aside from Allie's account of the accidental death, they were raising the specter of insanity. It seemed that psychiatrists examining the subject at the instruction of the defense had proposed that Allie suffered from multiple personality disorder. He had neglected to inform the Naval Investigative Service agents who interviewed him that first day that apparently he had been split into 3 personalities on the night that Suzanne Collins died. Himself, Billy, a female personality, and Death, who had ridden a horse next to the car in which Sedley and Billy had been riding. Williams contacted Special Agent Harold Hayes, a profile coordinator in the FBI's Memphis office. He described to Williams the concept of lust murder and referred him to an article by my colleague Roy Hazelwood and I had written 5 years earlier for the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin entitled Lust Murderer. though lust in such cases is something of a misnomer. The article described what our research into serial killers had shown us about these loathsome, sexually based crimes of manipulation, domination, and control. The killing of Suzanne Collins seemed to be a classic lust murder, a premeditated act willfully committed by a sane individual with a character disorder such that while he knew the difference between right and wrong, he simply was not going to let that moral distinction get in his way. Williams asked me to look on the case and to advise him on prosecution strategy and to figure out how to convince a jury of 12 good men and women who probably had little direct contact with raw evil in their lives. But my version of the events made more sense than the defendant's. The first thing I had to do was to explain to the prosecution team what some of my people and I had learned during our years of fighting crime from a behavioral perspective, as well as a particular price we'd paid to learn it. I had to take them along on my own journey into darkness. Sedley Alley was convicted of the murder of Suzanne Collins the following year after her death. But he sat on death row for 20 years, 11 months, and 14 days, which was longer than Suzanne Collins was alive on this earth. I just want to encourage those of you who have a deeper feeling and understanding of darkness in our midst, of evil among us, and of the personality disorders and predators that walk among us in our society, to pick up any number of books written by John Douglas, but I would recommend